This is a 1957 Bolens Ride-a-Matic tractor. In the last video, I cleaned the fuel tank and shutoff valve. Next, I'm going to take off the carburetor. On this one, the throttle cable is connected directly to the carburetor. That means the governor can't keep the engine from running too fast, and you can blow up your engine. I'll fix that when it goes back together. It looks like all the parts are here, so that shouldn't be a problem. The throttle lever is locked up, and the choke lever is locked up. So I'll take it off and clean it, try to get that stuff working again. I've seen that green color in old gas before, but I'm not sure what type of fuel or additive causes it. Leave a comment if you know. I'm going to scrape the chunks out of here and do some pre-cleaning. That helps my carburetor cleaner last longer. That looks like the same black stuff that was in the fuel tank. Maybe that's related to the green fuel. Check it out, there's no slot in that adjuster screw. I wonder if that's an early one. The last carburetor I worked on didn't have a slot in the idle adjuster. This one don't have a slot in the main adjuster. I was able to move the choke with pliers. I'm going to work it back and forth to get it freed up. It looks like someone cut that lever arm and bent it over to form a stop. That keeps the choke from getting all the way open. It's probably not closed enough to keep it from working good, so I'm not going to change it. Okay, since it's going in the carb cleaner, I'm going to pick these gaskets out of here. Looks like I'll need some new gaskets for this one. While the carburetor's soaking, I'm going to work on the exhaust elbow. To get to the bottom bolt on that, I need to get the governor arm out of the way. And to get some room to work in there, I'm going to get this fuel line and filter out of the way. I can't get that wrench on there. Feels like there's something in the way. This spring that I'm pointing at with the screwdriver needs to be contained in this slot here. If it's not, the governor won't work right. That might be why it was bypassed. So I just have to hold that out of the way to get the wrench on. That mark there must be from rubbing on that bolt when it was running. That seems like it's binding up there. I'm going to loosen the other one. Can't get the wrench in there. Didn't take enough parts off. I pulled the shaft out of the bushing in the back, so I gotta get it back in there. The corners of the nut's gouging into the pipe, and the stud's too close to it. Looks like the stud's crooked. Some critter probably put that in there for safekeeping and then couldn't get it back. I'm going to count the threads that are exposed so I can put it back in the same place after I take it apart. I counted 4.5 threads exposed on top there. Now I want to mark this part so it goes back on the same way. I'm going to put a punch mark on the top of the flange. There we go. Now I'll get that back on the same way. These bolt holes are too small. Need to fix that. And the stud's loose. Actually, the stud is bent. So maybe that hole isn't crooked. I have this part bolted to the mill. Well, actually it's bolted to the rotary table because I didn't want to lift it off there. But I have the spindle located over the hole, and I'm going to drill the bolt hole to a larger size. Now I have an end mill in there. I'm going to create some clearance for the nut, and that'll all be lined up with the bolt hole. For this operation, I have the end mill locked in place vertically, and I'm raising the work table with the big crank. That way I have good control on the depth, and I can come down to just barely touch the surface there. You can see where the end mill touched all the way around there. And this stud and nut fit in there with plenty of clearance now. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Looks like the end mill removed a little more of the threads on this side, but the clearance should be the same. I'm going to use this sander to remove the burrs from where I made the holes bigger. I made a good stud and put it in there. Now everything fits nicely. Plenty of clearance to tighten the nuts. Here's the bent stud. That and the small holes made it hard to work with. Now I want to put some clearance in this elbow, and I'll put the clearance where this wear mark is. I'll do the same thing straight across from it. Now I have this part clamped in the vise, using some chunks of aluminum for spacers, because you want the clamping force to be gripping on the flat part of the elbow there. I have some lines scribed where I want the clearance to be, and I did that with this 6-inch ruler and center head attachment. You can lay it on the face of something round with the angled faces against the edge of the circle, and the edge of the ruler should cross the center of the circle. You can move it to the other side to verify your position, just in case the circle's not perfectly round. This is not a precision location, just some clearance for the nuts. I'm going to cut into it and see what it looks like. I'm using an end mill with a rounded end. It's a ball end mill. It'll leave a nice rounded shape. If there's any square corners, your casting will crack easier. Looks good so far. I'm going to move it over and remove more metal. I just don't want to make it thin enough to weaken it. That's good there. Don't want to get any closer to the threads. Now I'll do the same thing to the other side. To verify the position of the exhaust, the hood has to be in place. So I need to put the tank on because it supports the hood. The longer bolt goes in the back. I'll put it in later because it goes through that rear support bracket that's on the tractor. On the last one of these I worked on, the tank had to be right up against the bracket here. So that's where I'll start with this one. When you do that, the shutoff valve is pretty well centered in the hole. Normally on these there's an extra nut or a spacer of some sort to bring these studs up level with the top of the head. That way the mounting plate don't get deformed like this one is here. It's dented in where those nuts have pulled down on it. It looks like 3 of this type of washer brings it to just above this surface. That might be too high, but it's a good place to start. On this side, that sheet metal gets in the way. I'm going to see if I can get the washers under it. I can get them under there, but if the sheet metal's in there, it won't sit right. I'm going to cut the sheet metal. It's already been cut, so I'm not making it any worse. Now I'll put that long bolt in there for the rear support bracket. Yeah, that don't feel right. There's not enough thread engagement and there's a gap under the plate. I'm going to take it down to 2 washers on each side. That's good there, except I forgot to raise the exhaust pipe up. The hood prevents it from moving very much, and that's where it needs to be. The pipe's touching the fuel tank plate here. I might be able to use that as a reference point if I can't tack it in place with the hood on. Well, that cutout for the nut is off by a mile. That wear mark I went by probably wasn't even caused by that lower stud. So I'm going to mark on here where the clearance needs to be and fix that. Missed it by that much. Alright, I put that extra clearance in there. I would have showed you, but it would have looked just like the first time I did it. This time I screwed the pipe in a bit farther, and that tapered fitting wedges into the hole in the hood. So that's going to hold it right where it needs to be. One thing I do that I forgot to show on camera is try to center that bolt-on flange in the bolt hole clearance when you tighten it. Then when it's welded together, the bolt hole clearance should give you a little bit of movement each way so you can adjust the final position. And it looks like there's one place where I can get the welder in there and tack it with the hood on. Here's what that tack looks like. That looks pretty good. I don't see any holes that would be an exhaust leak. I'm going to grind the weld a little bit to make clearance for the nuts. Here's what it looks like after the grinding. Here's what it looks like bolted in position. That's nice and solid. Here's the hood in position. It looks like it's going to line up. That fitting has a lip on the bottom, so I have to flex the hood over a little to get it started. Once the lip gets below the hood, it's not against it anymore. That's all the way in there, and it's touching all the way around. That's as tight as I can get it by hand. That's good. That's the reason I fixed this by welding those pipe fittings together. The goal is to get this running with the least amount of labor to keep the selling price down. If I would have tightened the pipe fitting, the muffler would move closer to the block, and I would have had to modify the hole in the hood. I'm going to try to make it run and drive nicely while changing as little as possible and move it on to someone else. Then they can do it up the way they want to. Okay, that's as far as I'm going this time. I got sidetracked on the exhaust and had to finish it up. Next time I'll have to get back on that carburetor. Alright, that's it.